How much would better engagement be worth to our chapter? That's what I would like to talk about today. We've talked a lot about in the last couple of meetings that we've had together. We've talked a lot about developing an advanced visitor host program so the visitor experience is incredible. We've talked about how to have a really nice open house event, and a lot of you are having nice open house events. I believe we did that in December. Now what we're going to talk about is, now we've got the people, what are we going to do with the people? And we're going to I really want to get into a little bit in engagement today. I want to get you thinking about some things. My hopes are, after we talk for a little bit on this presentation, that you take this back, meet with your leadership team, and ask yourself these questions. I've got a series of questions now. The disadvantage we have in a webinar-like format is we cannot get interactive, because this would be an incredible interactive type of it'd be great to have this thing be really interactive, because we could get a lot of great ideas from each other. But we'll have to just do it in a webinar style. I'm going to throw some ideas out there. I would love for, when we get done talking about this, to keep the conversation alive in our chapter. This would be a great thing to talk about in your team meeting together. Talk about this with your director consultant. There's a lot of things we can do with this whole thing. And so I wanted to open up with a lot of these ideas. These questions actually come from Gallup Corporation. There's a book called First Break All the Rules. It's one of the better books I've read about management. And they did a survey. Gallup, you've heard of the Gallup poll before. They're also people that are part of the strengths-based movement, or the Strength Finders movement, which I'm actually a part of, which I'm proud of. So it's a great company. They take millions of surveys, millions of tests, and they get metrics, and they're big into statistics. And I love statistics personally. I know a lot of you do as well. They surveyed 80,000 managers and 1 million employees for a state of the workplace-like report. And what the real conversation was really about was, what makes managers truly great managers, and what makes truly great companies, and how do the employees feel about being a part of something like that, is what it really came down to. The test that they took out there sought to prove that, what they sought to prove was happy employees equal productivity. Okay, so we're going to use some corporate terms in here, but I would like you to translate these to your BNI, because I think in our BNI chapters, I know most of our chapters are running like a company and not a club, and we want to run our chapter like a company. So it's a volunteer organization, it's a member-based service organization, so we have people showing up every week. It's one person per profession. And we've got this opportunity to measure productivity. That's what makes BNI fairly powerful, is the fact that we actually measure our performance. So we can take these concepts, and there's something tangible behind them. We can actually look at this and say, okay, we have metrics to prove this. And I think your chapter has plenty of metrics to prove that happy employees equal productivity. But let's dig into that a little bit deeper. How do we really embrace that? How do we take a look at that? And how do we get the conversation started about having happy members, if you will? And how does that equal our productivity? So this is the measuring stick. There's 12 questions that they sent out to employees. They interviewed managers. I'm going to share with you all 12, and then we're going to break it down to make it very simple. Okay. The first one that they had was, do I know what's expected of me? Do I know what's expected of me? The second one is, do I have the materials and equipment that I need? Okay. The third question they had was, do I have the opportunity to do what I do best? All right. The fourth, in the last 7 days, have I received recognition or praise? Now, I know what you guys are doing right now. You're thinking, hey, at my work, I wonder if this is happening. Good question. The fifth question, does my supervisor or somebody at work seem to care about me as a person? That's one that they ask people. By the way, if you take a look, and we're not going to dig too far into the stats, most of these numbers are fairly low. Okay. Only about 30% of the people in the United States are actually satisfied with what they do for a living, and are satisfied in the management structure of where they work at. So 70% of the people out there are not satisfied. All right. Based on these questions. Number 6, is there someone at work who encourages my development? That's the question. The 7th one was, do my opinions seem to count? The 8th question they asked them was, does the mission purpose of my company make me feel like my work is important? Okay. 9th, are my co-workers committed to doing quality work? The 10th one was, do I have a best friend at work? Believe it or not, that's probably out of all I had several conversations with the Gallup folks in Atlanta, and they said, that was the most controversial, believe it or not. I guess people feel like, well, there's work and then there's home life and you don't have the friends, but they found that companies that had a best friend at work, people got hurt less. There was less accidents. There was less problems when they had somebody that they could call on at work, which I found that question to be really interesting. The 11th one, then the last months, have I talked with somebody about my progress? And then the 12th and last question, have I had opportunities to learn and grow? And so what the Gallup did was they actually took these questions and they sent it to all these people. What they're trying to figure out is what do good managers have in common? Okay. By the way, leaders and managers are two different things. A leader, by book of the definition, I agree with how this book defines it, is somebody that looks to the outside. A leader is going to look towards competition, the outside marketplace, and it's very important. Okay. Management looks from within. Where are we at with our people? Where are we at with with these questions? Are these questions being fulfilled with our people? Both are incredibly vital and critical to grow a group or a company. I think a lot of times people have a misinterpretation. They think management is a pass-through job to get to leadership, and that's really not what we're talking about here, and it's not. They're two different things. So management, in a sense, is really what we mostly work on. We work on leadership in BNI, and a lot of times we focus pretty heavily on leadership, and we miss the whole management aspect. And that's really what I want to talk about today, is how do we get into this management aspect? How do we take a look at it? So those are the 12 questions they had. If you take a look at it, the base camp and camp 1, what do I get is what questions 1 through 2 really represent. What do I give? That's questions 3 through 6. Camp 2, and see, these were done in a certain order because it's kind of like climbing a mountain. You wouldn't start off by going to somebody and saying, how can we all grow? By the way, people do that sometimes. That's the summit without having the base. You'll fall right down from the mountain, okay? Those are questions 11 and 12. Those are how can we all grow is the last. You've reached the summit when you've satisfied all of these 12 questions. You're up to the 12th question, okay? For the sake of what we're doing together and for the sake of being good managers, we're going to focus on camp 1 and base camp. And by the way, as I was studying this and talking to some of the people at Gallup and reading the book, the really great managers of the world don't focus on all the questions. They focus on the first 6. And so that's what I wanted to break down today is focusing on the first 6 as great managers. And we're going to break into those here in just a moment. That's why I was asking you to have a pen or something handy, because this may be really helpful for you. Only 13% of employees are engaged at work worldwide is what the study showed. In the United States, only 30% of employees are engaged at work, okay? So it got me wondering as a BNI director, and I hope you as a leader or a member or wherever you're at in our organization, doesn't it make you wonder about our chapter? How many people in our chapter are really engaged? And what does engagement look like in our chapter, okay? So great managers focus on those first 6 questions. And so what we want to do together as a leadership team, as people on our webinar today, is really focus on how do we focus in on those first 6 questions, and how do we have it where this is something that's a constant focus. I think you'll find if you focus on those first 6 questions, the other 6 have a tendency the first 6 will really build culture, and as you build culture, the rest of them have a tendency to work their way out. So we're adding new members right now because we have March Madness going on. And it's awesome. And keep going. Okay, we want to be adding members past March Madness. But are we focusing on the first 6 questions? And that's what I'm going to pose to you today. So I wanted to go in a different direction today in our conversation with what we're talking about. So the first question, do I know what is expected of me? So let's think about that question. Do I know what is expected of me? Now, if I was doing something live or interactive, and I have another opportunity to do this interactive at another place next week, and probably what I would do is break you into groups right now, okay? And I would have you come up with ideas of how can we help a new member know what's expected of them. I wanted to throw a couple ideas I had. I was just looking at these slides and I started hashing out some ideas. The first thing I saw was having a really good visitor orientation. So we have somebody that comes to our BNI chapter and they're visiting, and this is before they've even really put in an application, we're giving them a great visitor orientation using the system we have. We're not going to everything, all the commitments, all that, the 5 commitments. We're not doing all that stuff with them, but we're painting a picture for them. We're starting to build a level of anticipation. A visitor host could be the person that handles that, and so could the president. Okay, so it's not just about giving them an application. That's really what the conversation's been for the last 2 success summits is, okay, we gave them an application, we're having them fill out an application or answering questions that they may have about our membership, but are we kind of painting a picture of what we're about culture-wise as we go along? That's what we're talking about. Is that happening with us? The other thing that you could do as a chapter is to make sure when we bring on new members is to make sure that we do a proper new member orientation. So what that looks like is when they put the application in, we actually print out the contract for profitability and what's expected, the code of ethics, and we make sure to go over each one of these bullet points with the new member as we're taking their application. They want to join, they've got their application, great, we're going to work on the payment, let's go over what's expected. And we make sure to have them sign that. So we explain the why behind that the whole time. Okay. Here's what we're finding. I had an interesting conversation with another director, and I'm going to give a shout out to Dustin Latchford. We had talked about this as we're talking about development. We're talking about things in chapters. It seems like when this step is missing, that people do not know what's expected of them. It seems like we have something called mutual mystification. When that happens is what it does, it actually it causes drama later is what it does. So if your chapters ever experience drama, okay, and listen, we're in a people business, okay? That's what I love about what we do because I really like people. I like different types of people, okay? I like all kinds of different types of people. But I know people can look at things much different than I do sometimes, and I know people can look at things much different than you do. So what having a good new member orientation will do for you would be to set expectation. And the other thing I wanted to say about this before we go any further with this, if a person is not with what's expected of them, why are we accepting their application? And that's another thing. Just because somebody has an application and a payment doesn't necessarily mean they're a fit for what we're trying to do, okay? So that right there, this number 1 step, if I stopped here and I said we're just going to do this really well, as we add all these new members from March Madness and all the other visitor days and open houses and things we have going on, I think what's going to happen is I think you're going to have a firmer base just by that first question. That's why it's called base camp question. The first 2 questions are base camp questions. And of course, knowing what's expected grows as we introduce them to the mentor and we start to develop our Passport to Success program. So these systems, what the systems are in place for, the BNI systems do, is they help it that you have a consistent experience. But what if we were to take these 6 questions and match them with our BNI systems? That's what my conversation is about today. So that's the first question. The second question that they ask in this Gallup poll is, do I have the materials and equipment that I need? Okay. Now, I don't know if we really have equipment in BNI, all right, but we do in a sense. We do. Let's talk about that. The mentor, our Passport to Success program, that's a program that Passport to Success, if you're not using that, we should be using that as a chapter. We've actually seen some chapters where they've purchased the Passport to Successes and had it for everybody in the chapter, get everybody up to speed so everybody knows what everybody's role is. That's really, in a sense, getting the materials and equipment you need. I mean, you're getting them a new member packet. It has a Passport to Success. It has a name badge in it. I guess that could be equipment. But here's the thing I really want to hit on. If you really want to give a new member the material and equipment that they need, we're making sure that they get to member success program training within 60 days, 30 to 60 days. If you don't get them to MSP training within 60 days, you have a tendency to lose them within 6 months. It's because they're not getting the materials and equipment that they need, and a lot of times they do not know what's expected of them. They see an opportunity for gain, okay, but they may not understand farming versus hunting even. And that's where attending member success program helps you with that. It's also really vital when a person comes up for renewal, they should come through the member success program training again. Why not have your renewing person take your new member to the member success program training and go together. That's really what we're talking about. So that's a big part of it. Do I have the materials and equipment I need? MSP training is the way to do that. And that's a way to get that question answered ongoing, because what's going to happen is a lot of times, especially in that first year, that coming back to member success program training after having a year of BNI, a lot of times it's in a different context than it would be when we first joined BNI. But whatever we do, we want to get people registered right away. I've seen chapters where they actually have an iPad and they register people right there on the spot. Matter of fact, when they do the new member orientation, they make sure to register them for the member success program, because they want to make sure that they have the materials and equipment they need. A lot of the materials and equipment that they need in BNI is information. That's really, in a sense, what we have as a product, I guess, if you will, or materials and our equipment would be the information that we have to help them be successful. So member success program, the passport to success, and our mentor program is really a big part of that. And if you want to retain the people, by the way, retention is really where it's at, because if we can keep a person, we should put just as much effort into bringing on new people as we do to keeping the people that we have. And these questions will help you to keep the people that you have as well. The third question, do I have an opportunity to do what I do best in my chapter? Do I have an opportunity to do what I do best? Now, this was an interesting question when I was looking at it, because I was thinking, well, how would a leadership team person know? This is a photo from me in 1988. Man, that's so old. This is I was actually, my original background before I got started my first business and has since have worked on a second and third business. Before I did that, I was in the military. I was a heavy equipment operator. I trained at Fort Leonard Wood, and I was a combat engineer in the Air Force. So I had we had a lot. We would be deployed for like 3 or 4 months at a time. And it was interesting because in this particular job, we would work in the UK. This is actually in the UK. It's right by Greenham Common, if some of you are familiar with history and where that's at. I was there when all the missiles went over during the Reagan-Thatcher buildup. All the troops came over there, and we put, everything had missiles and things like that. It was crazy. Anyway, I was one of those troops that went over there, and we had a lot of projects all over the place. This particular project I was on for about 4 months or so, 4 or 5 months. I think I went back 2 times. So I'd probably spent 6 months in this place. It was a big job that we had, and we would work in the UK. Where I lived at in the UK, the sun would come up in the summertime. It seemed like it came up at like 5 in the morning, and it would go down at like 11 o'clock at night. So you had almost unlimited hours, almost like being in Alaska, because you're so far north. And so as combat engineers, we would use this time to be working all the time. So we would get out there and we would work till sometimes 7, 8 o'clock at night. Now you think that, and we would work through weekends too. So you think that would be a really horrible thing. And it was a little taxing on the body at times. I wouldn't want to do it now. Now I'm an old guy, but when I was 18, 19 years old, it made a lot of sense. But here's the thing. The time just flew, and it was so fun. And the reason why was I got a chance to do what I did best. And what I did best was operate a cat scraper. I was a very talented heavy equipment operator, not on all equipment, but on this equipment I was. And man, I loved this. I was a one striper, and I was having tech sergeants and master sergeants take my training, and I was showing them how to operate a scraper, and I operated all the time. I mean, always running this thing. That was my baby. I named it. I loved what I did. So the time and the work that I put into this thing, it really it didn't even seem like it was that much work. It just seemed natural, easy. It flowed. There was flow going on. It just was so cool because I was actually able to do what I did best. And so now, how does this translate to a BNI chapter? We as leaders, we really need to decide, we need to figure out, what does this new person do best, and what do the people in our chapter do best, and how do we put them in that particular position? And so that's really what we're talking about, is how do we get that new person doing what they do best? Now, who's really responsible for that? Well, Passport to Success really helps, because you get a chance to see what all the other roles do. So it gives a new member an opportunity to see what the different roles do, so you can put them in a role. The mentor will help with that as well. But let me key point, one person. The chapter president is the person that really, in a sense, is responsible for the flow chart of the chapter. So as a chapter president, we want to, when we bring a new member on board, we want to be looking at our flow chart. And if you don't have a flow chart set up for your group yet, go ahead and get that set up. You still got plenty of term left. Okay, we're only 3 months into the term, 4 months into the term. Get that flow chart set up, and as we bring new people on from March Madness, let's put them in a role. Okay, but let's not just arbitrarily put them in a role. Let's try to figure out, as presidents, what do they like to do? What would this person really like to do? If you get them through the passport to success and then ask them that question afterwards, you get a chance to really see what they like to do. And that's a good question to have. Have them go through passport to success and say, what would you like to help with? All new members want to help. They just want to be asked. If you don't ask them, they'll just sit back. And then you'll have the old guard and the new guard, and the old guard's always been there, and the new guard comes in and out. We want to have a collective team. So do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? That's the question. Here's the other question they had. In the last 7 days, have I received recognition or praise? Now, this is based on full-time employees. We meet once a week, so probably once or twice a month, recognition or praise. But what does that look like in your chapter? What does that look like? We definitely want to do recognition. The vice president, this is in your wheel well. This is a vice president duty, usually about the second week of the month, I believe, because you want to get the member traffic lights. So recognition for member traffic lights, black badge, if somebody qualifies for a black badge, a blue badge, if somebody qualifies, that's where the director consultant can help you with that recognition. But let's go beyond that, going beyond the standard BNI things that we have. Where are we at with this? And how do people like recognition? That's the real question to ask. Not everybody, the public recognition works for some people. For some people, they don't care for public recognition. As leaders, right, as a president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, we ought to be trying to figure that out. What do they like? I mean, some people like way to go notes, just a handwritten note, catching somebody doing something right. As leaders, we ought to be looking around the room and saying, how many right things every week? Now I'm going to challenge the presidents especially. Look around your room as you're running the meeting. How many right things are you seeing going on? Is that visitor host that shows up early and sets up that visitor host table? It might be a really incredible educational moment. That's going on right. How many right things are we seeing? Are we doing things like writing a handwritten way to go note? Do we if they like recognition? You can tell the people like recognition. The only true way to really know would be probably to give everybody a personality assessment, and I don't know if that's feasible or not. Okay, but sometimes just asking them, what's the favorite recognition you've ever had? What's the best recognition you've ever had? Okay, and it'll usually give you something. That somebody will say something like, I got a handwritten note from my boss and it meant a lot to me and it's framed in my office. Some people might say, I got up on a big stage and they gave me a big award. You can tell a lot of times both ways are right. They're just based on personality styles. There's no wrong way, but figuring out as a leader how people like their recognition goes a long ways to it. Maybe we do a shout out at the chapter. Maybe we do use social media to our benefit. Maybe as president, we're taking pictures of what's working best and we're putting it up on our Facebook page and making sure the name knows people and why they're important. Those are little things that we can do to recognize, what's going on in our chapter. As leaders, though, we want to become fixated with what's working best, because we get an opportunity to see things that aren't working. And by the way, we know what's not working, and we're going to work on getting those better. Okay, but what's working best? How can we really get people pumped up? The most important thing that we do, especially coming up in March, is our all-star events. These all-star events are so important because not only do you give a chance for all the chapters to get together, but guess what? Your all-star, sometimes your chapter will get recognition. Sometimes every chapter gets, at least one person will get recognized from your chapter. We want to make sure that one person has everybody in the chapter at the all-star event. So you cancel your meeting that week, make sure. We had a chapter one time where they had the all-star, and I think 2 people from the chapter showed up. And to be frank with you, I'm surprised the all-star didn't leave. I'm surprised they didn't leave the chapter and go to another chapter. Okay, because that's like a deflator. That's not an inflator. That's why we do it, is because it gives us an opportunity to really do some recognition, make people feel wonderful. for what they do for our BNI chapter. So it's a great opportunity for you. So that's what number 4 says. So where are you at as a chapter with that? The 5th one, does the leadership team or someone at the chapter seem to care about me as a person? By the way, I twisted the questions a little bit so it's a little bit more applicable. But does the leadership team or someone at the chapter seem to care about me as a person? This is a photo actually from our friend Kendall. He's a director consultant. A lot of you know him. He's a director consultant in Springfield. He's really been battling some cancer, and it was cool because that part wasn't cool. But what was cool was we put together an event. One of his other organizations actually put together an event. It was a neat event because it was like people were saying great things about Kendall, and Kendall was there, and then Kendall was able to talk to us, and it was really special. And I love this photo because it's not just his home chapter. There's people from other BNI chapters that showed up for that. So I just thought it was neat because it gave someone in the chapter, it gave us all a chance to show that we care about him, because we do. And I thought that was a wonderful thing. So in your chapter, how do you show that you care? As an officer team, when you're looking at your members in your chapter, in a sense, if we're in command of this group, in a sense, we're the leadership team. I'm especially speaking to leaders. It could speak to everybody, but especially leaders, because in a sense, you're the managers of the group. What are we doing to show that we care about our members as people? Okay. I tell you something that's a really great way to show you care about a new person is about 60 days into their journey is to have a one-to-one with them and make sure it's working. Basically, how's it working for you? You could pull some metrics, some stats, see if they're receiving, not as much of what they're giving, but are they receiving some referrals? 180 days out, we have another person sit down, and the way you do this, the way you systemize this, because it'll get out of control because you all are working on other jobs and things like that. When you add a new member, you put in your calendar 60 days out a reminder to contact that new member. 180 days out, you put a reminder to contact that new member, to sit down, to have coffee with them, to see if it's working. How's it working? And if you're not doing, somebody in the chapter needs to be doing that. Okay. The member events, this was an event for Kendall. I hope everybody in his chapter showed up to be at that thing. I don't know if everybody did or not. I wasn't taking attendance. I was just enjoying the experience, because I thought it was something real special. But when somebody in our chapter does something like we have an open house event and we're going to bring the chamber, we're going to do a ribbon cutting. The question for you to take back was, how many people show up to that event? How many people from our chapter are actually showing up to that event? And what can we do to get everybody? By the way, they won't naturally just show up. As a leader, we have to inspire them to be there sometimes. Okay? What are we doing as leaders to inspire this? Member events. The secretary treasurers, I'm going to reach out to you now on this call. As a secretary treasurer, what are we doing to really hype up that keynote presentation? Not just for the new members, but for the existing members. Are we making a big deal? Secretary treasurer, man, we ought to be making a big deal about these keynote presentations and say, hey, who do you need to bring? How can we do this? Getting excited about it, promoting it on our social media. Man, this is great. Laura's going to give her presentation, and this is going to be outstanding. It should feel like that. Are we doing that as leaders? And that's what the 5th question really talks about. Does the leadership team or someone at the chapter seem to care about me as a person? And the last question, actually, I just do 2 5s? I think this is the last question. Sometimes I miss numbers. Is there someone at the chapter who encourages my development? Is there someone at our chapter that encourages my development? So it could be a leadership team member. It could be a mentor. It could be the president definitely can do that. The officer team. By the way, this is where education coordinators come into. A CEO, an education coordinator / mentor could really encourage that kind of development with a new member. It's just about getting the right people in the right position in the chapter. And that's where you find their gifts at. So those are the questions, and it's a really outstanding book. By the way, you may have seen this before. The darndest thing, I want to simplify these 6 questions for you. This is the best way to simplify the 6 questions. Print this out and have this at your next team meeting. And look at each one of these touch points, because a lot of them we're doing right now, this visitor days, website, member invitations, we're getting people into our road to retention, all right, because of March Madness. We talked last week about the pre-meeting info, the first meeting, the application visitor orientation. These are all really visitor host operations, and this is what we talked about in our January Success Summit. They're getting follow-up phone calls. We'd love to have you as a member. They come back for a second meeting, so they're there. They're having a great experience. This is all visitor host type of stuff. It's open house activity. It's March Madness. It's all this really great stuff to recruit, prospect, and bring people in. Then it starts to get interesting, because this is where a lot of times it just kind of slacks off, and this is where the 6 questions really come into play. The new member orientation answers many of these questions, especially that number 1 and 2 question. That's your new member orientation. Your mentor, passport to success. Wow, how important is that program, both of those programs, because it's 2 different programs on one touch point, okay? How important is that program to retaining members and also to answering our first 6 questions? As a manager of our chapter, how does that look? And that would answer a lot of the questions. Getting MSP within 30 days. We do it everywhere every other month, okay? So you may have a little bit more than 30 days, but we're getting them into that member success program. By the way, member success program, that's talked about in the new member orientation. If a person refuses to go to MSP training, like, oh, I'm not going to do it, maybe you shouldn't accept their application. Have you thought about that? So that's I've had people say, well, they join, but they just can't do MSP training. Well, why did you accept their application? That's part of the program, the member success program. You're not giving them the tools they need to be successful, because all they see is an ability to take in business, but they're not seeing that we have to learn how to really bring business and contribute. Okay. What you'll do is, if we don't have that going on, you'll have a chapter of hunters versus a chapter of farmers. Okay, so the MSP training is really critical. The next one we have our new member open house and ribbon cutting. So that's an opportunity for our secretary treasurers, for everybody in the chapter, to really bring a lot of visitors for our new members, so they can see that presentation, so they can know that, by the way, if you brought a lot of people to the new member open house and ribbon cutting, and let's say that they sent out 25 letters, because we talked about that, they have 5 visitors, but the chapter had 10, so we got 15 visitors in the house. 5 were brought by the new member and 10 were brought by the chapter. What kind of a message would that say to your new member? You know what it'd say? It'd say that we care about your business, is what it would say. That's what it would say. And if somebody cares that much about your business, how could you not want to turn on to this thing and do what you do best? See, you'll do what you do best when you're inspired to do best, because it's all about management. 90 and 180 day reviews. Are we having somebody going over 90 and 180 days out with that new member? How's it working, man? I mean, when a new member joins, do people almost jump over the table to try to have one-to-ones with that new member? That's the question I'm posing you. I don't know the answer. You do. I bet you do. Look at it. Are we jumping over the table to have a one-to-one with that new member, by the way? 90 and 180-day reviews. So that's what we talk about with that. And then member events. When we have a member event, is everybody from our chapter coming to this thing. And by the way, not just saying, hey, guys, I hope you make it, but actually pushing this thing. If you're a president, you're calling everybody to make sure they show up to that. You're making sure that people show up to that event. You're not going to make sure that no member left behind. Everybody's going to show up to this thing. And there'll be a few that don't show up, but they probably will, especially if you're inspiring as a leader, so as a manager. So that's what we're talking about. That's the whole road to retention. I left it out last because we've mentioned this so many times. It's been in so many different presentations, but I thought that if we could take a look at the 6 questions first and then take a look at road to retention, I think it all starts to add some clarity to this whole program and where we're at. So I hope it gave you some clarity today of what road to retention can do for your chapter. I didn't want to open up with that, though. I really wanted to talk about the 6 questions, because I think those 6 questions are really vital. There's something that all the managers that they surveyed in this book that Gallup did, it was interesting because people that do statistics are always looking for things in common. And what threw them off when they first started the research on this book was the fact that these managers didn't have anything in common. Some were in big companies, some were in small companies, different types of people, different areas, geographic, different industries. I mean, it was just, there's so much differences. The people doing the stats were like, how can we find something in common? But as they interviewed these great managers, based on productivity, by the way, the ones that were really productive and had really high scores with their 12 questions, scored highly with the employees that they had. Okay, so the employees were telling you that they were the top managers as well as the results were. Okay, these are the 4 things that came out that they found in common with all the great managers, that people don't change that much. So people bring their talents, their talent themes, their gifts into the operation when they join your BNI chapter. don't waste your time trying to put in what was left out. So if somebody's not strong at something, the worst thing you could do is try to make them stronger at something they're weak at, because they can work really hard at a weakness all day, and they can, do 20 hours and they'll have average performance. What we want to do is we want to figure out with each person that's in our chapter, what are they strong at, and how can we get more of that? So try to draw out what was left in. That's what we want to do as good managers with people, is figure out what their strengths are and build on those strengths. We want to take what they're best at. I get a chance, it's the question, I get a chance to do what I do best every day. We want to take that and we want to build on that. And it's hard enough trying to build on that versus trying to turn somebody into something that they're not. Okay, so everybody in our chapter is a little different. As leaders and as managers, our responsibility is trying to figure out what that is. Okay, and that's really what this whole opportunity talks about. I'm going to leave you with a quote today. I hope you found the information to be really relevant, valuable. This is Don Clifton. He's actually the founder of the Clifton Strength Finders movement, if you will. And this is what the movement's all about. And I'm a part of this, and I'm proud of that. What will happen when we think about what's right with people rather than fixating with what's wrong with them. So I hope you found the information today to be very valuable. If there's anything our team can do to help you out, we'd love to help you out. Thanks for taking a little bit of time today to be on our call. And I hope this encourages more conversations and more deeper conversations about how can we understand the people in our chapter even better. So thanks for being on the call today, and we'll talk to you soon.